Hello. This video lecture will talk about briefly introducing what information architecture is. So what is this information architecture thing? It has a whole bunch of different definitions, and we're going to go over some of these. The first one is the idea of design. Information architecture is the structural design of shared information environments. So when people go to a website or use a book or any sort of informational object, they're going to need to pull information from it somehow to use. The idea is that information architecture is the design of how this thing is put together. Information architecture is also a combination of things. It's systems. So a combination of organization systems, labeling systems, search systems, navigation systems. These can be in physical, digital, or cross-platform ecosystems. Now you're probably thinking, wait a minute, ecosystem. Isn't that a word I learned in biology class? Well, yes, it is. The thing is, if you look at the bottom picture, we have the Sonoran Desert there. Well, it's got a biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment. So yeah, in there we've got the saguaro cactus, we've got some cholla cactus, we've got palo verdes in the background, there's an ocotillo. I can guarantee you in those bushes there are roadrunners, there are tarantulas, there are scorpions, there are black widow spiders, there are chuckwallas, there are, all sorts of interesting biology living there. But at the same time, this is an ecosystem, right? They all interact with each other. If you look at the top picture, the city. Sure. Well, there are bugs who live there, there are birds nesting, and there are people around, sure. But what else is there? Well, the whole thing is an ecosystem because it is a complex network or interconnected system. So if we start talking about the city as an ecosystem of finance, an ecosystem of transport, an ecosystem of commerce, all these sort of things, you get the idea. So we're going to go with the word of ecosystem as a complex network or interconnected system. What else is our information architecture? It's an art. It's a science. It's both. It's shaping information products and experiences to help people use, find, and understand information. And information architecture is also a discipline. It's an emerging discipline. It's one that is not particularly old. Let's say people have been thinking about it systematically for maybe, 20 years or so. It's also a community of people who are working in this field. They're looking at bringing principles of design and architecture to the digital landscape. So they're taking things from the ideas that have been used for literally centuries about organizing information and presenting them in physical spaces, transferring those to the digital realm and cross-platform realm. So what else is information architecture? There's a famous architect named Le Corbusier, and his real name is Charles-Édouard Jeanneret Gris, but his big thing is that he was one of the modernists. He's one of the best-known architects ever, and he had a really good line. He said, "A house is a machine for living in." What does this mean? It means that the house is not something that people should adapt to, it should adapt to people. This is a fundamental idea in the areas of user experience, in technical communication, interaction design. You get the idea here. So his idea is something that we as professionals try to live up to. So accordingly, architects, they design houses, right? Well, houses and commercial buildings, strip malls, all sorts of stuff. But the idea is architects design physical places. Information architects, they design idea places. These information machines. People work and live inside these things, so this is what information architects do. Information architecture is not, however, anything that is concrete or touchable. You can't reach out and say, I am holding information architecture. You can hold an artifact that contains or uses our information architecture, but there's nothing you can reach out and actually touch itself. To use a good line from literature, there's no there. You can't touch it. So in information architecture, absolutely everything we talk about is abstract. It's a set of abstract relationships that link abstract concepts. That being said about abstraction, let's try to bring it down to a concrete level so you can see what we're actually talking about. So if we talk about some information architecture concepts, for example, components and dimensions and boundaries, Let's compare books and websites to see how they compare to each other. So, components of a book. We've got parts of a book, physical parts. For example, there's a cover. There's a title. Now, is the title actually physical? Well, sort of. It's printed on the pages somehow. It's probably printed on the spine. It's probably printed on the cover. But the point is, it exists, right? This abstract concept called title. It's there in a book. We've got the author. We've got the sections. We've got pages themselves, the physical objects. We have page numbers that number those physical objects. We have a table of contents, an index. The list goes on. We've got all sorts of different parts. Then we go to a website. How does a website compare to a book? Well, we've got a main page and home page. We've got nav bars. We've got links, content pages. We have a sitemap, a site index, search button function. So you see how these two things sort of parallel each other? They cross over sometimes, but there are unique differences between the concrete physical object of the book and the really fairly abstract pixels, the ones and zeros of the website. Let's talk dimensions. Well, what's the organization of the book in dimensions? 2D pages. Well, technically three-dimensional, but generally speaking, two-dimensional is the way we experience them, and they're presented in linear sequential order. Now, the only time that you're going to find a book that you don't go in sequential order is something odd, like, I don't know, the choose-your-own adventure books as a kid. But those are only unique in themselves because, well, gee, this is not the way they work in normal experience, right? Let's talk about websites. Websites, though, are multidimensional spaces with hypertextual navigation. Oh, hypertext. People used to get really, really excited about hypertext. Like, wow, I can click this button. I can go somewhere else immediately and find something else. This related text. This is so cool. Well, we just kind of take it for granted now, don't we? That if we click a link, we can go somewhere else. This used to be a mind-blowing concept. Well, let's come back to our information architecture about books and websites. We talk about the experience of people using these things. Books, 2D pages, linear, websites, multidimensional, matter of fact, multimedia. And we go from one page to another and maybe even between different quote-unquote books, different websites. We can flip back and forth. So people's experience, these dimensions are very different. The boundaries. Books are, well, fairly finite. There's a beginning, there's an end, there are 3 dimensions. You can reach out, tap the thing, and you can tell where you're supposed to start and where you're supposed to end. The interwebs, though, what exactly is a website? Well, the user doesn't care too deeply, most likely. If a website bleeds into another website, let's say that your corporate website has different subsites and your user goes from one subsite to the next. Do they really care? No. They're just trying to get their information, and if it's suddenly like, you are out of this site, you can't come back, they're going to get annoyed, right? So the point being, the boundaries are very different. So we start thinking about information architecture and what we're supposed to do as information architects. We start to consider, what is our user doing? How are they interacting with this? What do they want? How are they going to get there? How will they feel when they get there? All these ideas that are wrapped up in user experience. Let's talk about some fundamental information architecture concepts and building blocks. First off, this idea of information. We need to differentiate data from information. Now, I've taken this image from the interwebs, and I thought it was pretty good, so I'm going to share it here. Data. Data are just raw facts. They have no meaning in themselves. They are just facts. On the other hand, information is processed data. We have taken those facts, we have put them together in a way that helps create meaning, create this idea toward a purpose of some kind. It's organized so that people can do something with it. Data is, if you look at the Latin word, the etymology of the Latin word datum, something that is given. And then we have look at information. Informatio, formation or conception. So if you look at just the etymologies of the word, datum, data, that is something that is just here, this is. Information, something that is put together from things that just exist. Data is independent of information, it's out there. However, information you can't have without data. And finally, I want to talk about the difference here. Data or raw data is not enough to make a decision. If someone needs to decide something, even if it's Am I going to put on the heavy puffy jacket or just a light jacket, or am I going to go out in a t-shirt? Data is not going to help them. They need information about what the weather is. So they're going to gather information, and that is what can help people make decisions. So when we talk about information architecture, we're really talking about gathering data, helping put it together in helpful ways. It's a concern that information of all shapes and sizes. So, for example, we could be talking websites, Word documents, an app of some kind, images, the list goes on. The point is anything, I mean just about anything whatsoever that conveys information, that can be subject to information architecture. Information architecture is also interested about metadata. Now the word meta means about, so metadata is data about data. Those are terms used to describe and represent content objects. For example, documents, processes, organizations. Let's say an image. You're all familiar with this. The metadata on an image. You take a picture with your phone. It is not just its file name, but on the back end somewhere it says what time you took it. There may be a GPS location associated with it, and probably a phone ID associated with it. All of this stuff. So this metadata, this is also something that information architects work with. Another information architect concept you need to know about: structuring, organizing, and labeling. Structuring is determining appropriate levels of granularity for information. So there are quote-unquote atoms in your site. You got all the little data bits. How do they relate to each other? What's on the same level? So this image here should help you out a little bit. So if you start at the bottom, you can see that there are minutes, hours, days. You can split that days about into weeks and months. Months go to years. All right. So you're looking at very fine granular data at the very bottom and very coarse granular data at the top. If you want to think about it like rocks, years are boulders. You bust the boulder into smaller chunks, so you have months. You bust the months into smaller chunks, you have days, and keep busting down, then you have all the way down to minutes. Now, if we want to, we can keep busting. We can go to nanoseconds if you want to, picoseconds, whatever is necessary. The point is that if you start to combine these things in baskets, you need to make sure that they're all the same level. So we can't put minutes in the same basket as years. We want to have different levels of data. Organizing. You have to put them into meaningful and distinctive categories. So again, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about. We want to gather information and put it together and present it to a user so that they can decide or understand what's going on. Well, do they need minute by minute? Do they need hour by hour? Do they need day by day? Do they need year by year? Should I divide it into weeks? Should I divide it into months? Point is, it is up to you, the information architect, to decide how to slice and dice and represent that information. Labeling. You need to figure out what to call categories. You need to figure out what to call the series of navigation links. So if you could say direct your user wants to find out about time. Okay, great. The timeline for this. Well, whatever the subject is, great. Let's call the categories of time when stuff happened. Okay, well that's not necessarily bad, not necessarily great. How about calling, instead of when stuff happened, detailed timeline of the American Civil War? Yeah, okay, that's a little more helpful, isn't it? How about minute by minute breakdown of the Battle of Antietam? Oh gee, that would be really, really super detailed and helpful and let me know exactly this is what I'm looking for, wouldn't it? Well, the navigation links. How do I want to access these things? War stuff. Not very helpful. How about, let's say, timeline? Oh, vaguely helpful. The point is, you understand what I'm saying here. I don't need to belabor this, but when we label our data, label our pieces of information, we have to make sure that it makes sense for the user and matches up with the things we're talking about. Another concept, finding and managing. Why does information architecture even exist? Point is, if a user can't find what they need, that product or website, it's a failure. Information architecture also needs to balance the user's needs. The businesses that are putting things out, your future employers, they have goals, right? They need to sell their products. They need to attract customers. They need to get mind share. They need to blank whatever it might be. What's the product? What is this thing I'm promoting? The product itself has needs of some kind. Perhaps you're on a website and constructing it. What are the goals of the website? What is it trying to do? So you need to balance all of these out. Now there's this information architecture Venn diagram. It's represented in your Polar Bear book, and I encourage you to take a look at it there. But the big idea here is that you have to balance who is the user, what are they doing, what sort of content is there, and what is the context? Where are they using it? Why are they using it? What are the goals of the organization, the website, and what have you? Another fundamental concept is that information architecture is not only an art, but it is a science. Information architects need to be creative people. They have to rely on their experience. They have to rely on their intuition. They have to have some sort of brainstorms every now and then. What if I did this? Oh, that would be cool. Let's do that. If you don't have that, then, well, odds are it's just going to be bland and dull and you won't get anywhere. But at the same time, if you just get too creative, then, well, reality suffers, right? So information architects, they have to understand what people are actually doing. They need to get out there, look and research. What are the people's patterns of usage? How do they actually go about navigating, etc.? So field research in the world with people who are actually real users doing real things. And grounding your information architecture in reality is very important. Speaking of important, why do we even want to do information architecture? I'll give you a list of ideas here. First off, the cost of finding information. What does it cost to find information? Well, when you're talking about on a website, it's only going to cost maybe a fraction of a penny just to find something. Like, okay, I'm going to go on the internet and I'm going to look up, I need a new calendar. Where can I get a calendar? Click, 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 click. Well, what am I spending? Spending a little bit of time, spending some mental energy, spending a couple of cents in electricity, etc. So that's okay. But what if it takes me a long time to find something? Well, gee, time is an expensive thing, isn't it? There's only so many, you're only alive for so much time, and you only have so much time to devote to certain things before you need to go on and do something else. So what does it cost to find information? The lower the cost, the better the information architecture. The cost of not finding information. So, for example, gee, I've got this really weird lump on my back. I wonder what it is. Well, if I can't find information about it, I might conceivably die. So the point being, if I have good information architecture, I can find the information I want, understand what it is, be able to use it, and maybe somebody, if I do have a weird lump on my back and I get the good information, I can say, this could be a problem, and I can go to a medical professional and they can help take care of it for me. And matter of fact, they need good information architecture as well, because if they see this strange lump and say, I've never seen anything like that before, I wonder what that is. They look it up and they can't find anything. They're going to say, well, gee, I don't know. So the cost of not finding information can be, well, high. The value of education. Well, y'all in school, right? You're paying money to be here at Kennesaw State University. We as professors, we're trying to learn you some things over here. So the point being that when we start talking the value of education, well, gee, if you can't find information to learn, then it's no good. If we can't present information that is a way that will help you, then what good is it? So education, it's a valuable thing. The cost of construction. How much does it cost to put something together and do it well? You've probably heard there's an old saw about good, fast, and cheap, pick two. Well, think about this. If you want something that is really good information architecture, well structured, easily to understand, visually attractive, etc., and you want it really fast, well, you're going to pay a lot of money for that. On the same note, if you want it really good, it's probably going to take a little while, but you can do it more cheaply. Point being, the cost of construction. If you put good money towards something that is useful, well, gee, it'll probably pay off in the end. Maintenance is a big thing too. It's possible to build something that is absolutely beautiful from an information architecture standpoint, and yet have it be, well, unupdatable. People can't get into it, what have you. How much would it cost to maintain? So even though it may be beautiful, it may be impractical. Training. How much does it cost to train somebody to use this thing, to maintain it, to create it even? Good information architecture will help people. So oftentimes, information architects are used in the training field. So interaction design and technical communication often are dragooned to help out with professional education. You teach people how to do their jobs. Corporate training, internal corporate training. Well, gee, if you have good internal corporate training, it's well structured and so on, so then the costs on it come down and the company is doing better. But if you have bad materials, then people's experience isn't very good. Well, it costs more, right? The idea here, cost of training. And finally, the value of brand. Brand is a big thing in corporate America today, and we start talking about brand. It's a fairly complex concept and one I don't really want to get into too deeply. But the thing is here, if you have good information architecture on your company's products, odds are it will help your company's brand. Your company will have a better name in the field, people will like their products, and generally the company will do better. So to review, we've talked about a few things today. We've talked about what information architecture is. We've talked about what information architecture is not. We've talked about a few fundamental concepts, and we've also talked about why information architecture is important. Thanks very much. Have a great day.